Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice Time. We dive into some big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined by this time by Bill Meltzer, who it's hard to introduce Bill, so we'll just say he does a lot of things in the hockey world: the Flyers, Dallas Stars, runs Hockey Hot Stove. So if there's anyone you want to blame for the articles that I'm writing, go send them to him. But send all your complaints to Bill. Don't send them to me. How are you doing, Bill?
I am doing well. Getting them, ready for a gauntlet of 4 games. With a back to back this weekend. So try to get a little bit of sleep, cover some practices, and just keep rolling.
No, yeah, I it's always that's the crazy part about the schedule is that when it amps up and you get those crazy weeks, like those days off, like today was a Monday that there's only 2 games tonight where it just feels like it's a recharge day. And it's funny talk about the schedule and the craziness of it all. And I think you actually traveled to all the games, so it's great that you're on this week because I wanted to talk not about hockey per se. It is about hockey, but really I'll call it the inside baseball episode, like the stuff behind the scenes, the like what beat writers go through. I cover the AHL. I'm in my third season on the beat there. So a little bit of a different type of craziness that comes with
Yeah.
that league and just covering some of the stuff. Interestingly, in Belleville this weekend, the smoke alarms went off and everyone had to evacuate the building. Just another crazy moment in
The
uh
American League. Yeah. Yeah.
in that league. But let's start with a simple one, which is out off the ice, or just really like from a fan's perspective. When you're watching games, when you're let's say at home and you're not on the road covering game in person, what are some things? Let's just start with this, which is some things you would say that beat writers or people who cover the game do when that fans should do to follow the game more intensely, because I think a lot of fans are always curious, like, oh, like I watch my team or whatever, or maybe NHL Network, but what are some things that you would say just off the top of your head to, like, okay, really know the game, really follow the game?
When you have an opportunity to, if you're on a beat, right, um, and you have an opportunity, the game doesn't overlap that same night, but to do a little bit of the journalistic version of a pre-scout. You look at what the next opponent has done recently, so you have an idea of who's been playing well, who's maybe struggling, maybe they've juggled some line combinations, things that you can take into that, because usually, I mean, you should have your finger more or less on the pulse of what the team you're covering has been doing, but to have a better perspective of what to look for in the next game, it is good to know what the opponent is doing. Um, so that's always a good thing. And also, if it doesn't work out that way, and you have a little bit of time to kind of look at some teams in the other conference, maybe there's a game going on later that night. Maybe it's an upcoming opponent, maybe just some players of interest, right? But to just generally follow what's going on, to check in between periods, not just on NHL.com, but to go to a site like Natural Stat Trick, and it's I don't think you should ever go solely by analytics, but I do think it adds color to what's been, to what you're looking at. That's been one of the biggest changes in the industry over my career of covering it, because at first there were no analytics, at least that they were non-proprietary, and then really became more and more became available. Better information became available. More sophisticated information became available, and learning how to take the numbers and the eye tests, and learning how to find the medium between those two things, because some of the audience want one, some want the other, but I really think it's a balance.
I think what's interesting is you mentioned all this stuff, and I think what's interesting nowadays is that fans have more resources available to them.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the streaming issues where if a game's on Hulu Plus and you don't have Hulu Plus, well, too bad. Sometimes games are exclusively on Hulu Plus, and it's like fans like I don't have that or whatever channel. Not to bury on Hulu Plus, like of all channels, but let's just say or ESPN, whatever, ESPN Plus, whatever, all these streaming things. So or Amazon, whatever, but there's more resources available to fans now. I think what's interesting is if you're a fan and if you have social media, follow all the beat writers, not just on your team, but all around the league, because they're the ones who obviously their written work is better to follow the team and understand it better, but they'll be tweeting out the lines or they'll tweet out stuff from
Yeah,
practices uh like it'll tweet, oh, I don't see this player during practice, maybe there's something going on there, and you gets you a little bit of an edge there, a little bit more of an understanding of a team. And I think the other thing I would add is it's interesting because like for me, I travel a lot also nowadays. I'm not home often to watch games. When I am though, it's interesting because I have like a big TV, I've got a little TV. I think it's good to have it's harder to focus on. Some people are very good at focusing on two games or one at the same time. I'll have like a second TV on plugged into like one of the local teams while I'm watching, let's say, NHL Network, and it kind of gives you a good view of some of the stuff going on Twitter. There's all the highlights, let's say, or Blue Sky. The highlights are being posted, so you could see that as well. There's a lot of resources available to fans, and I think that's some of the things that are helpful as well.
yeah,
I kind of want to dive. You talk about how different it is these days. I kind of wonder what your let's I'll ask you what your first kind of welcome to hockey story is, which is when you're traveling and something crazy happens while traveling and you're like, okay, now I'm actually on the road covering games.
yeah.
My quick one is I hate thinking about this. It's almost 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Is that my first game? I had an old car that broke down like after the game, and I had to like figure my way out of that mess. That was a mess I like to forget, but it's memorable, so it's worth repeating. But Bill, you I don't know how when you started. You've been covering for hockey for a while, so
Yeah.
what your one of those first like welcome to the NHL? We'll call it welcome to the NHL moments is.
Yeah. Yeah. I was that first generation of internet-based writers. So I've a number of stories, but I'll limit it to my favorite one. I think anybody that knows me knows that my all-time favorite player is Mark Howe. If I could have been any hockey player, I would have loved to have been a 40 goal scorer, became a Hall of Fame defenseman. You know, uh, how how he was unbelievable. So, but at any rate, so I think it was the second game I ever covered. It was 99, the second NHL game because I did AHL hockey for Hockey's Future before I got NHL credentials. So that took a couple of years. But my second ever NHL game um, at the at the arena, which is now Xfinity Mobile. I don't remember whether it was First Union or Wachovia or what it was called at that time.
I
They've
think
changed
yeah,
names so many
Wachovia.
times.
It's similar for me in Hartford. They call it new. They some bank sponsored it, and I'm
Yeah,
doubling down and calling it Hartford Civic Center. You always call the arena its original name. Heck, you might call it even the Spectrum, but I
yeah,
digress.
yeah. Spectrum too, but at any rate, so there's the commissary downstairs, and you turn around a corner to go to the elevators. So I was carrying a cup of coffee without a lid on it, and I'm hustling to go to the elevator. And who do I literally bump into but Mark Howe? And I covered the cup of coffee, burned my hand, splashed it all over myself, but not Howie. Did not splash Howie. And almost got coffee all over my all-time hockey idol. The second game I ever covered. Years later, I tell Mark's son Travis about it. He said, "You know what? It would have been an improvement to his wardrobe. We've been telling him to get a new jacket for years. He should have just let it fly." So, yeah,
I'm trying to think now of my most like like that reminds me of embarrassing player moments where players like it's easy to forget. I think the embarrassing moments are actually good because it reminds you that they are human and
yeah,
they are just like me, you, or players. I mean, they're athletics, so they're not just like us, but they are the human aspect, especially for hockey players, where you have an embarrassing moment and they find it funny, and then all of a sudden it breaks the tension. Sometimes, like post media, there's a lot of tension in the room, and it breaks that tension. One story that reminded me of is I was actually in the AHL, and we knew we were getting two players after the game. I knew one of them was going to be the goalie, Dylan Garand, who had a
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
shutout, a very good performance in net. The other player was the overtime winner. I didn't know which one was coming first. And this is my first time doing post media with Hartford. And I asked the first guy who comes, "Oh, you made some great saves. Were you seeing the puck well?" And he's like, "I'm a forward." And we were like, "What? No."
That's
It
yeah.
was Alex Belzile, who's a great character, great guy. He took it very well. So we just recorded it. I'm wondering, with that in mind, do you have one of these stories that it's like with a player or a coach that I guess what the better way of saying it's good thing there was no social media to catch any of that
Oh
because
yeah.
there's some players that talk about back in the day, like if there was social media, we would never have made it to the NHL or whatever with all the stories that they go through. But do you have one of those stories also that uh, comes to mind with all this in mind?
Yeah. Yeah. I never, never specifically that asking a goalie question to a forward, but there was. I mean, the rivalry between Swedish and Finnish hockey, right? So more than once, I've asked a player with like a Swedish sounding name, and it turns out he's a Finn, and they love to correct you on it. So I remember that a couple of times, and then there was another situation, and whatever, like it was. So as you build relationships, right, with players. Now it's hard. It's harder nowadays to exchange text with the players, just because teams prefer that you go through their PR. It used to be a little bit easier to communicate directly with the player, and to respect that relationship, you go through the PR. But this was back when it was pretty open game to just text back and forth with the player, um, and asked one of the Flyers players, and it was Jake Voracek. um, like it was the second game or first game of the preseason, and basically I asked if Michael Raffle was going on the trip, you know, um, because we were given one lineup, but they practiced another way that day, like the travel group, and so I asked if Raff is going, and he's like, "Dude, it's 2 in the morning." It's like, well, I know that for you, it's two, and I guess for me, it's 2 in the morning too. But I'm trying to write a game preview, and like, I just want to know if he's on the trip. I wouldn't ask you that during the season, but for a preseason game, I just want to know if he's going because you already know.
I,
So
I think what's funny about that is that when we're covering the NHL or covering the AHL on the road or whatever it is, we kind of lose track of time at all. And
yeah,
we're like, oh yeah, it's a normal time for whoever. And then it's like, no, it's not. It's like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. I think
yeah,
that's like the other part to it is that you kind of you people who don't travel, don't cover the games on the road, don't know that
yeah.
like yeah, you're getting back wherever it's like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and it's like oh yeah, it's really late. It's like
Yeah,
you're
it's
on a
just
different
right
time
for
zone.
everybody else. And just real quick side story, real quick. When I first started dating my wife, she's native Texan. Her aunt in her Texas accent says to her, "Holy, never date a writer. They keep weird hours." She wasn't wrong.
No, yeah, and that's actually it's funny because similar to the hockey players and hockey coaches, where it's like hockey families, they're it's like you talk to the family sometimes and they're like, yeah, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into,
That's
and it's
right.
like
You signed up for this, yeah.
it's not just the time schedules and stuff. It's the especially for coaches who or
Yeah.
players, it's like, oh yeah, you got to move 1 year, move the next, and it's the all on the road for like for when a team has a road trip, it's they're on the road for 10 days and they're gone for 10 days. And it's also, yeah, you credit hockey families for putting up with the
For sure.
craziness and a little bit of that. But on the note of travel, I'm kind of wondering, you because you cover all the games, I think you fly a lot, so you actually have a
Yeah.
different kind of travel experience. I don't fly for games, I actually drive for them, so it's a little different craziness there. But what travel story, what's a crazy travel one? The one that comes to mind for me, just because I'll just quickly throw a travel one out there, is the game in Bridgeport. it was a Saturday night. It's snowing before the game, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
whatever. It's snowing a bit. After the game, the whole place covered in like a foot of snow, and I'm like driving back in. This is like peak AHL, like midwinter experience where you drive back. It's a foot of snow on the
Yeah.
I-95, which takes you from Bridgeport to North Jersey, and I'm just like, stay in the middle lane, keep this car in slow, don't speed, just make it back. I got back real late that time, but
Sure. Yeah.
that's just one of those crazy welcome to the AHL moments. But
Yeah.
what's something that comes to mind with all this?
My craziest ever travel story was not actually covering the NHL or the American League. It was actually traveling with the Flyers alumni in Russia. My craziest NHL story though is the first time I ever had to sleep in an airport because because of tough weather conditions, snow on the ground, whatever. The hotel attached to the airport is already booked up. Right, my flight is at 5 a.m. It's already the flight was scrapped. So the first time I ever slept in an airport, trying to use my backpack with my computer as a makeshift pillow. That one certainly stands out. It's happened a few times, not a bunch, but a few. But the craziest ever story in Russia. It was February 2017, and we traveled to Kazan, to St. Petersburg, and to Moscow for the trip. Now we were flying from Kazan to St. Petersburg. Um, Now, if you're flying Aeroflot, which is their main national airline, you're fine. We, you know, this is already after the Yaroslavl disaster, right? We had to fly with the domestic airlines to fly from Kazan to St. Petersburg, and on our trip was Al Secord, who, of course, he played in the NHL for a long time, and then after his playing days, became a commercial pilot for American Airlines. So tons of flying experience. Um, we're flying from St. Petersburg or from Kazan to St. Petersburg, and I mean, this was the flight from hell. The plane was shaking. At one point, not just turbulence, we're at a 45-degree angle. Okay, with snow coming down, negative temperatures on the ground, and finally we straighten out. After the white knuckle experience, Al Secord says to the flight attendant, "Excuse me, does the pilot speak English?" He said that, and he showed his credential. I'm a pilot with American Airlines, and I just would like to speak to the pilot. She spoke enough English to herself to say, yes, he speaks some English if you want to talk to him after the flight. He didn't tell us anything till we were at dinner that night. And at dinner that night, Al tells everybody, yeah, everybody was in a lot of danger tonight because of the way that the tack that he took to take off, and he should have flown a much more circuitous route. He was trying to get us there as fast as possible. He said every one of us were put in jeopardy, and I want to know why the hell he did it that way. So thankfully he waited till dinner that night to tell us. But I always thought says that. Oh my gosh, wow.
You guys, it's like you guys are actually like in danger. Like
Yeah,
that's that. No, it's like yeah, that's I mean, Russia's not the Wild West as much as it's the yeah, it's that frontier of like
yeah,
you feel
yeah.
like at times when some of the games or some of the stories you hear from players in the KHL, it's like yeah, there were no rules there, or there were like it was
It's
one of these
a horror
wild leagues and all
for
this
sure.
stuff and that. It's actually funny you mentioned the Russian players, and I think what's interesting is not just from Russia, but Sweden or Finland, wherever they come over, and especially at the AHL level, which is the league I cover, sometimes they speak no English and trying to like communicate them cliche. Like one of the interesting things I think is what some fans can realize, like why some players, let's say, who come over or maybe don't talk as much, we don't hear a lot from them, or like, oh, they don't have this personality. It's like, well, some of them actually do, but we can't get it out of
Yeah,
them because
they don't. Yeah,
we don't speak the same language. And sometimes
yeah,
like even cliche lines like, "Oh, it was trial by fire." They'll just look at you and be like, "What did you
yes.
just say?"
Yeah,
And you're like,
they might not have that expression on language. Now the Swedes, they do tend to speak pretty fluent English.
"Yeah,
If you go to Sweden or even watch the Swedish TV, which used to be able to do a little bit online, um, there's a lot of English programming with Swedish subtitles, but they have English programming. Pretty much any Swede under 60 is pretty fluent in English, unless they're really from the hinterland somewhere, where they might speak just a little bit. So the Swedes generally are no problem. They're sometimes like in Swedish, because I'm self-taught in Swedish. The word rolig means fun, like it means like funny, but in Swedish, like funny and fun are pretty interchangeable. So if they say something is funny, but they mean it's fun, or vice versa. That's how that happens. Like if you can speak a little bit of a language, you can see sometimes the mistakes that they make, or whatever. Usually the Swedes no problem. Finns, some Finns are fluent, some Finns are medium. Samu Tuomal, the Phantoms, came over speaking almost none, but now is pretty fluent. So it's definitely a mixed bag. Czechs used to come over speaking no English. Nowadays they can usually speak some. And Russians, it's a relatively rare Russian who comes over speaking comfortably
Well,
in English.
well, yeah, I think it's the part to keep in mind is it's the Russian players that depend on where they come from. Like some of them
Yeah,
come from areas that it's like really like it feels like I would say it's the equivalent of like the North Dakota of Russia, where it's like
yeah,
it's like yeah, they grew up on a farm or they grew up where they're skating a lot and they're playing a lot of hockey growing up, but it's not that they're not from a city. It's interesting, yeah. Some of the players, let's say even from Germany, where it's like they're from cities that it's like
yeah,
very multicultural, bilingual, or whatever you want to call it, and because of that, they are able to communicate more easily. And it's funny because like yeah, you talk about some of these players and it's like they are great personalities, and they're the personalities it's like you just want the fans to know about it, but it's hard to get that across from them because they have that barrier, which is funny with the Russian players. Like so once they start speaking English and once they start getting along with the media and the fans and whatever,
yeah.
then people see it like Ovechkin or whoever
They yeah.
with yeah with all that one of the things I guess shifting gears a bit I guess is a good way one of the things that I'm thinking about, I'm trying to formulate this, is there's a lot of things that I think the media secretly roots for at the game that fans don't know, or fans are like, maybe fans even like them. For example, a good example is overtime. Fans
Mhm.
love overtime, and fans are rooting for overtime, especially if that means they get a free point, which for their team it does. Media hates overtime. Not hates overtime, but like media just a lot of times will it's that oh we're going to overtime. This game's ending another 20
Yeah,
minutes later.
yeah.
I was at the rookie series in Allentown. We actually wrote that this first game went into overtime. This is the rookie series for context is before the preseason. So not just
Yeah.
the preseason, it's the pre-preseason.
Preseason.
The first game went into overtime, and there's this guy next to me, Wayne Fish, who's been covering the
Oh
Flyers
yeah,
for
yeah.
like
No way.
60 years, not 60, but for a long time. He's been covering the Flyers since the 70s.
15, yeah.
He just looks at me and he's just like, oh, he just has this look on his face of like, are we seriously going to overtime? Like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
feel bad. I was on cloud nine. So I'm like, oh, this is my foot in the door, or this is like a big experience for me.
Yeah.
But like, he was just like, I would not be here if this were not,
Well,
if I
yeah,
wasn't starved for hockey. But
yeah.
I just went off on a tangent there. But what are some things or a thing
Oh,
that comes to mind that the media hates or dislikes the fans like that fans don't know about that we secretly dislike?
yeah. Well, I certainly the overtime thing. Just real fast. Like sometimes, you basically have your story written, right? You
Yeah.
have your lead done. You have all the key stuff. All you're filling is the final shot totals, maybe the final power plays, or like one little detailed ad. You go downstairs and get your couple quotes, and then you pack up and you go for the night. When somebody scores a last minute goal, there's some big comeback in the last 5 minutes, and there's overtime. So, oh, I have to rewrite my lead. I have to rewrite major parts of the story. We root against that
That
a
that's a
lot
big
of times.
newspaper store. Back in the day when newspapers, when you had to write this game story and the
Yeah,
recap, and like that's actually a big shift. Is that's how fans used to consume everything? Is that the media would write a recap of the
yeah,
game and be like,
deadline.
"This is what
Yeah,
happened. This is what not,"
yeah,
and the extra layer to that for two things, which is why I think on overtime to add to that are one, if you had a 3-0 lead and you have your whole story filed,
Yeah,
and then it's 3-3 and it goes to overtime, and then the other
yeah.
team wins, and you just have to scratch that whole thing and
Grab it.
rewrite it.
Yeah,
The other,
that's you're starting, and you know it's gonna be a long night to do the rewriting. Now, thankfully, as you said, we're on deadlines for an early edition or something, so
yeah,
we have the time, and it'll run when it runs. But still, you're thinking I have to get out on the road because I have 90 minutes or whatever to drive or catch an airplane or whatever the case might be, and that totally goes out the window. Part of the business. One thing that one thing too that I remember in the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals. Two stories, real quick.
mhm,
Um, first story was it's Game 6 in Philly, um, and all the national media people. No, I am, as someone who grew up loving the Flyers. Wasn't working for the Flyers quite yet. I was working for Versus at that time. Remember, Versus was the national network. Um, so but a lot of the national guys, they were rooting for Chicago, not because they really cared who won the series, just because they wanted to end that night. They didn't want to go. They want to fly right back to
mhm.
Chicago for Game 7, right?
That's actually another thing I was gonna say, which is it's an extra layer to the travel or to the things that inside baseball like we root
Yeah,
for secretly. But yeah, well, the other funny thing about that, you mentioned the overtime, that game is another layer to why media doesn't like overtime, is because a lot of times the PR person, the public relation people will be like, who do you want after the game? Who are we going to get to interview? And the other layer to that Conn Smythe Trophy voting, you vote during the third period.
yeah,
If the game goes to overtime and someone scores an overtime winner, you don't know who to vote for on that.
yeah,
With that in mind, they
yeah.
could be the winner. Same thing with the media, but where they'll come over to you and say, "Who do you want?" I actually had twice. I was in Allentown and Hershey for the Lehigh Valley Hershey
Yeah.
back-to-back games. One went into overtime and shootout, and the other one was down to the wire. And I said to both media guys, like, I guess the contingency is whoever scores the overtime
Oh,
winner
the winner.
is who
Yeah,
we're gonna have. But
yeah.
like, I
Same
don't
thing you do
know.
in 3-star selection. It's
Yeah.
like yeah, we have to have whoever scores the winner as one of the three. But then and the Flyers are good with it because it's like if it's a guy who's done nothing all day long, right? Like I don't want to make him the first star. So the 3-star selection. Now some of my media colleagues take it more seriously than others. I really do try to take it seriously when I do 3 stars, but you know, but there still are times where it's kind of a toss up, and it's okay. Just give me who scored the winning goal, and then make the two goalies if it's a 2-1
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And I think what's interesting is that you mentioned, yeah, because the Conn Smythe Trophy, for example, what you're allowed to do when you get that ballot. I've never voted on this, but I mean, I don't. Maybe into that 2010 you had a vote. I don't know. I'm not. I'm going to leave that up to speculation. But you can write a contingency, which is if
Right?
the game is tied and someone scores the overtime winner, you could say if they score the
Yeah,
overtime winner, I want them as my first vote.
yeah,
But
yeah,
you mentioned the travel part, and I think that it was funny is everyone rooting for Game 6, wanting the series to end, is that's another layer, is you've covered the playoffs, which is if the Flyers are the one seed, let's just say they're the one seed, and the final day of the season, it's going to come down to two teams that can get in. Let's say one's the Devils and the other is the Florida Panthers or the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's just say it's one of those teams.
yeah,
It's obviously these are all like in
yeah,
hypotheticals where this is not going to happen, but say it did. Everyone in Philly media or covering that team is rooting for the Devils. As much
yes,
as it's like we're not rooting for it. No, you want a Philly versus Devils series much more than a Tampa series. I think that's the funny thing to add to that, which is
yeah,
in the playoffs we're rooting for easy travel. Like that
yeah,
2010 final, as much as people wanted the series to end, it was a lot easier to travel to than Florida versus Edmonton, which is what everyone had to travel
yeah,
for. And I think the games the last the two years ago was a 3-0 lead. The Panthers had a
yeah.
3-0 series lead and it kept going. It went the distance, and the media by the end of it were just exhausted because of the travel. But
Yeah,
but I think
there's I think the other two things that I think media people would appreciate, I think more than just the average fan, are credentialing trailers for league events and media meals. That's those are like in like I'll say that in Dallas you get spoiled because the meal is free and it's usually pretty good. Um, you know, and so media likes going to Dallas because they don't have to front it for the media meal, right? Dallas, that's definitely one of my stops, right? Uh, that's they take good care. They give you a notepad, a new notepad every time you go there. It's they take good care of you. Other places, like Calgary, you have to walk across the catwalk to your spot there,
I heard
or
about the whole
places where the
cat.
media, yeah, or places where the media meals, $20 or up, and it's like barely cafeteria food, right? That's hey, no complaints, right? Because we're taking pretty good care of overall, but that's one of them. And I will say that in terms of credentialing trailers, um, it's really at different times, different people have to wait. Back to the 2010 finals, super fast. Of course, Bill Barber, Hockey Hall of Famer, uh, worked for the Flyers at that point, in scouting, um, and he went to the NHL credentialing trailer, waiting for his credential to think it was game 3 or 4, because so waiting for his pass. I said, "Well, we don't have it for you here. We don't have a pass for you. So what's your name again? Right now, if he was an arrogant sort of a guy, which Billy is completely opposite. He's a typical hockey player. He's humble, right? And he waited the whole time. He would have said, "Listen, walk in the building, look up in the rafters at the retired numbers. That's my credential. Now hand it to me, and I'm going in." Right? But no, he waited for 45 minutes for his credential.
Yeah, that's one of the crazy. It's like where it's like wait, who are you? And it's like I'm on the wall here.
Yeah,
I'm like my plaque is right
yeah,
there. It's like those kind of things are also a layer to that. You mentioned the food, and it's interesting. At the I'll just say at the AHL level. It's funny when NHL media comes over for the AHL games. Usually happens during the Calder Cup playoffs
yeah.
because their team's out of it and they want to cover their prospects of the team that still is in it for their AHL affiliate. So a lot of the media will come to Hershey and they'll be like surprised, like, "Wow, this is actually like NHL caliber." Like the
Yeah.
food
Oh,
there is
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
The
I will say the Phantom Spoil is Timbits and Tim Hortons coffee and
Yeah,
soft pretzels. It's
yeah, the
not
Phantoms
bad.
do it well too.
Yeah.
Phantoms and Hershey, those two teams do it well. I'll just say they do it well. Other teams in the AHL they don't, so it's a little
Not so
different.
well.
But
Yeah. So,
Hershey, it's like they have a meal in the basement or by the locker room, and you're like, oh, this is actually it's pretty good. We're running a little low on time, so I actually want to wrap up with just one more media thing that I'll say, and then I'll want to get your thoughts on this because this is something that I think is very polarizing, which is the early start times, which is the 1 o'clock start time. Some people hate them and others love them. I actually don't like a 1 o'clock start time, but that 5 o'clock start time, which allows you to get back to wherever in time to still write and still have enough stuff to like do stuff. What's your ideal start time inside baseball one? Like an ideal start because 7 o'clock or sometimes they even move it to 7:30, which
or
really is
yeah,
which fans are
yeah.
like, I don't get it. It's perfect staggered times. We love this. And then media, it's like, no, 7:30
That
versus seven is
that
too much.
half that half hour makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like could tell lots of stories those with start times. I've come to like afternoon starting times on the weekends for two reasons. When you're covering the NHL, a lot of times because they have the multi-purpose buildings, and if it's an afternoon start, a lot of times if there's an NBA team there, they have to do the changeover, so you have to kind of get out in decent time to beat the traffic coming in and those kind of things. So, and you usually you're in bed a little bit earlier, get a little bit more sleep because we were talking about the general lack of sleep that comes with the profession. So,
Yeah.
but definitely, even the rare 5 o'clock games that you have, or 6 o'clock tomorrow with Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, I don't mind those. It's like well, when you have the team that you're changing time zones, and that's an 8 o'clock start your time and whatever, it drags, right? It feels like a late night. So no later than 7.
No, yeah, like that's the one that I'm just thinking about. It's the 7:30 start times, and the other layer to it is when they do a 7:30, and then they honor a player during the game, which you're like, oh, you're covering the team. You're like, oh yeah, I'm glad this is happening. You're excited about that, but then the puck drop is like 7:50, and
Yeah.
you know you're getting in late. Like there are players afterwards that they see are tired, and they're like, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, I'm fine. It's a little tired, but that's all we got. I'd say where we can find you all over the place. So make sure Bill. Bill, thank you for coming in. I know it's been a little hectic making it all work and putting the schedule, carving out time out of your busy schedule. But this is a fun discussion. Appreciate having you on.
That was a pleasure. We had a lot of fun, and I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, I was thinking beforehand, this is either going to be the most popular episode we've done, or at least no in between. I don't know because like either maybe fans will like this. I don't know. We'll see. But
I
for
hope
now,
so.
that's all we got. Make sure to check out all Bill's work at NHL.com, Hockey Hot Stove. You think you're ghostwriting a few books? Flash, I've written a few books which worth checking out. I believe one of them is about Dave the Hammer Schultz, which is
Mhm.
exciting to
Just
read
came out.
about.
Yep.
Yeah, it just came out, so check that out. We'll probably add the title. We should link the book maybe into the YouTube or whatever. I digress on that. But check out my work at Hockey Hot Stove. A few things are churning out a few things. I'm covering the AHL, NHL. A lot of exciting stuff there. And hope you enjoyed this episode and tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.